Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about Chane, and this is my release deck list for Chane. Definitely some areas to improve on, but I think this is a decent baseline for a Chane list in Blitz. So very nice they gave us the young hero foil in the Blitz deck, so don't have to fork out big bucks for this. Starting with the weapons, I believe these are all viable choices, which is why I run them in my equipment slots. Um, but I think in most matchups the preferred weapon is Nebula Blade because it swings for 4 with a good on hit effect. Usually it's not too hard to trigger Nebula Blade because you have things like Seas of Agony and Shadow Puppetry, Dimensional Gateway, lots of things that trigger Nebula Blade, so it's not too hard to trigger the claws on Nebula Blade. And the rest is just if you feel that you will not have a lot of resources in the matchup and you have to swing for one resource. Galaxy Black is pretty good as well. It almost always demands a block, otherwise it does 4 damage for one resource, which is pretty good. In the other, we'll go with the main equipment first. You run Snaps, Grass Skullcap, and Carrion Husk. Okay, so Snaps is one of the best equipments in the game. Most of your cards have 0 or 1 cost, with the exception of Piercing Shadow Vice. So this could be used to like extend the combat chain and make your opponent take some damage or throw some more cards. These two just block for 2 each. And then Carrion Husk is insane. Carrion Husk is a big part of why I think Chane works in Blitz, because the early game with Chane is pretty much just blocking a lot of the damage and then activating the Chane ability, create a shackle, then just beat you with whatever I banished so I don't take blood depth. But when you start reaching like maybe 4, 3, 4, 5 slow shackles, and you want to have like a really huge turn, you just take this and you throw it in their face, and then this saves you like two cards worth of block. So this card is very insane. Then moving on, this is the Wizard, the Wizard Respect package. I think most of the time it's correct to use Ebon Fold instead of Crown, because this deck doesn't run a lot of blues. This deck mostly plays yellows anyway, so having the option to destroy the Ebon Fold to prevent 2 damage is very powerful, because that basically saves you a card. And like if you do this, you can block like an entire, like you can block Sonic Boom for 4. Like that's pretty powerful. So if the Wizard's turn is Sonic Boom for 4, suddenly it gets like kind of awkward. You just pitch a yellow and then you blow up the Ebon Fold. It's pretty good. Yep, the deck list. Deck list is for blues. You have 2. Goodbye, Chane. For blues, you have 2 Maureen Skies, 2 Seeds of Agony, 2 Shadow of Ursa, 2 Vexing Malice, and 1 Dimensional Gateway. You'll notice that this list is missing Eclipse, because I don't think that Eclipse is good enough to use in Blitz. The game probably is not gonna last long enough for you to be able to Storm 6, and if you are able to Storm 6, your opponent is dead anyway, so Eclipse basically does nothing in the deck except pitch for blue, and there's other cards that pitch for blue but do stuff as well. So yeah, we are running 9 blues. This is a little light, but we have upped the count of yellows in the deck. So next we run for yellows, we run 2 Art of War. This card's very insane. You always choose banish a card to draw 2 cards, and depending on what you have in your hand or banish, probably choose go again, because then you can beat him harder. But if you're only gonna be able to play like 2 or 3 attacks, maybe +1 is good enough, because it turns like your Bounding Demigod yellow into 4. It turns your what's it called, Piercing Shadow Vice into 7. the +1 buff actually very relevant. 2 Springboard Somersault, 1 Dimensional Gateway, 2 Seeds of Agony, 2 Vexing Malice, 2 Bounding Demigon, and 2 Ghostly Visit. So in the yellow slot, we only have 6 cards that can be played from Banish, but that's because we just wanted some redundancy, and yellow is mostly there to pitch anyway. So we are running, let's see here, we are running 13 yellows and 9 blues, so that's 22 cards to pitch for resource. For reds, we are running the 1 Soul Reaping. Soul Reaping is very strong, especially in combination with a card like Shadow Puppetry. You can Shadow Puppetry, play Soul Reaping, you can banish a Bounding Demigon, and then you can play the Bounding Demigon after you Soul Reaping. That's pretty good. I'm playing 1 Red Seeds of Agony. Reason why I play 1 is because the Seeds of Agony effect and the fact that it's a 0 mana non-attack action is very important from the deck, but because red doesn't really change, having the red one doesn't really change a lot from having the yellow or the blue one. So basically I just wanted additional copy of this effect in the deck, but then red is just strictly worse than yellow and blue because it doesn't pitch for as much resource, and the clause, I think it only affects the cost of stuff you play. So this line basically only affects Piercing Shadow Vice, which is basically a non-factor. So you just play 1 red because you want to use it to trigger stuff. Play 2 Bounding Demigon. It's a free attack, 4 damage attack in a lot of situations. 2 Piercing Shadow Vice, 2 mana, 6 damage, pretty good. 2 Ghostly Visit, it's just 1 mana for 4 damage, just to help you to make your combat chains wider, have stuff to play off Chane. Because a lot of the other cards that Chane has, they are 2 cost, and like Rifted Torment, Rip Through Reality, they all cost 2, and 2 is too much. Like ideally all the cards in the deck should cost 1 or 0. The only exception is Piercing Shadow Vice because of course it hits like a truck. So yep, this is the only high cost action here. 2 Unhallowed Rites, 2 Shadow Puppetry. This card's maybe the best card in the deck, I feel, because there's a lot of lines of play you can do with Shadow Puppetry. You can do Shadow Puppetry into Enlightened Strike for 8, go again. You can do Shadow Puppetry into Soul Reaping for 7, go again, has a relevant on-hit effect. Yep, so this basically allows you to make your combat chain very, very wide, because there's only a few ways to give go again in this deck. There's Shadow Puppetry, there's Mothrian Skies, there's the Chane himself, there's Meet and Greet, which itself has go again, there's Snapdragon Scalers, and there's Razor Reflex. So this is one of the ways to make your combat train go super wide. We play Meet and Greet because there's a lot of like random incidental arcane damage in this deck, like Vexing Malice and Seeds of Agony. Vexing Malice, they probably don't want to bring in more than 1 Arcane Barrier against Runeblade anyway. If they're playing against the if they have experience playing against the old Runeblade, which was Viscerai, they probably think to themselves, hey, I just need to bring one Arcane Barrier, that's enough. But actually that's wrong, because now they printed Vexing Malice, which is a very, very strong card. I think the correct answer now is just, most of the time is Arcane Barrier 0, unless the Arcane Barrier is on a piece of gear that didn't have block anyway, like maybe your shoes. Like if you're not a Snapdragon Scalers class and you are a Iron Rod Legs class, like maybe Guardian. If you're an Iron Rod Legs class, you probably don't lose too much by subbing out your Iron Rod Legs for Arcane Barrier. But if you're a class that armor blocks and you have to sub out like Snapdragons for Arcane Barrier, I don't think it's worth it, because this deck doesn't actually do that much arcane damage, even though it's a Runeblade deck. the main source of arcane damage is actually Seeds of Agony and Vexing Malice in this deck. And sometimes if they got extra pitch value, they could activate Grasp of the Arknight, but probably isn't happening. So the arcane damage output of this deck is actually very low compared to Viscera. It's mostly physical. Yeah. And if you bring in Arcane Barrier 1 to stop clauses like Piercing Shadow Vice and Meet and Greet from triggering, the deck can just be until he draws Vexing Malice or something like that. So yeah, and sometimes it doesn't really make sense to pitch for arcane damage anyway, cause if Chane Seeds of Agonies you from banish and then beats you with something, like, are you really pitching a card to prevent one arcane damage without knowing for sure that you're going to take more arcane damage next turn? That means your resource is wasted. So yeah, so Meet and Greet has go again a lot of the time, and that's very important. 2 Enlightened Strike, just generic good attack, good combo with Piercing Shadow Vice. 0 mana, can be Razor, can be Snapped. Very strong. Speaking of Razor, play 2 Razor, because you can Razor everything in this deck except for Piercing Shadow Vice again. Yep, so that's the deck. These are 18 writs. The deck's playstyle is quite simple. You just take your cards and block early game in order to set up the shackles, because the longer the game goes, the stronger this deck becomes to an extent, of course, because you will eventually deck yourself. So you want to do things like block your whole hand, Arsenal the Art of War, and then create a shackles, beat you with a weapon or something. And then you want to clear your blood debt every turn so you don't fall below the threshold for Carrion Husk, because Carrion Husk a very important card to turn the corner against a lot of decks. This deck has pretty good matchups against Dorinthia and Ira, because Ira's damage very telegraphed. You can keep a few cards to block the big swing. You can take one, throw a grass in front of their thing, and then you can keep like 2 cards to clear your banish zone next turn. Then they'll probably have to throw like 2 cards at you to block, and then like you rinse and repeat until you eventually draw like 5 cards a turn, until you eventually draw like 8 or 9 cards a turn, because you draw 4 from end of turn and you banish 5. So eventually Ira cannot keep up with like your raw card advantage. So, and they don't really output that much unless they draw like E-Strike into Flying Kick or some ridiculous stuff like that on their Tunic turn. So yeah, Dorinthia's a good matchup because when they go for the big swing, you have these basically. You start with an extra 10 life against Dorinthia. So yeah, that's basically it. And the effectiveness of Dorinthia greatly reduces for every card that they lose from their hand. So it also works the same way as against Ira. You just eventually outvalue the Dorinthia, like after like 3 or 4 turns, because eventually Dorinthia doesn't have a hand against this deck. Actually, eventually lots of decks don't have hand against this deck after you get like 3 or 4 shackles going. So far I haven't decked out with this deck yet. I've come close. I think I killed my opponent with like 3 cards left in my deck before. Yeah, I haven't decked out with this deck yet. Usually they die before that, so that's promising. Initially we all thought that Chane would deck himself in Blitz and that he was a constructed hero only, but no, actually his inherent hero mechanic is very strong, having like unconditional go again on basically all of your attacks except Enlightened Strike maybe. Is very, very powerful, and good to see that Art of War is very strong right now. Good to see that it's good, because this is just a straight +1, right? Because you banish something that can be played from your banish zone, then you draw 2 cards to replace. So it's just a straight +1, and has very relevant text. Usually you choose go again, but if you can't make that big of an attack, you could choose +1, because the +1 is relevant in a lot of scenarios actually. So yeah, this is my Chane list. Quite sad that I can't play Eclipse in Blitz, because I think the concept of the Eclipse is very cool, but I think that in Blitz, if you could play 6 cards with Blood Depth in a turn, your opponent is probably dead anyway, so there's not much point. In Constructed maybe, but so far we haven't really had that many Constructed. We haven't had any Constructed events actually. Most of the events in Singapore are Blitz. Actually, everyone plays Blitz in Singapore. It'd be nice to try some Constructed events sometime soon. But yeah, thanks for tuning in to my video. Hope to bring you maybe I'll do either Boltin or Levia next. Not too sure about Prism in Blitz. I don't think it's very good, but I don't think it's bad either. But yeah, probably Boltin next. Yeah, so yep. Peace.